and computer science. In his sophomore year, he founded a smart wearable electronics glove company, whose technology was eventually acquired by the U.S. Department of Defense. Afterwards, he became the youngest director at SAP, the fourth largest software company in the world, studying the localization of analytics of an entire company. And then, most recently, David founded BlackScience, which is a B2C company that incorporates advanced data science to help individuals find the right jobs, skills, and connections for their career development. In the first 6 months since launch, BlackScience already exceeded $500,000 revenue. So, same as always, if you can put your phone away and give David a warm welcome.
Alright, thanks everyone for your time, really appreciate it. And I think, well, Taylor, the speech I know it was about an hour or something?
Sorry?
It's about an hour time for this?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll probably spend about 35-40 minutes talking, and then I'll leave the rest for questions or anything. And I remember a couple years ago, sitting back and listening to people talk. A lot of times I didn't understand what they were saying or I couldn't connect with it. So I really have 3 short stories, and I'm going to pause at each, and if it's not relevant, just tell me. We'll just scratch it, or you guys can get out early. I'm okay with that. So we'll work on that. Okay, so my 3 stories really all concern. Each of them have a sort of different thing involved. And I left my email in case, and it's my personal one, not my work one. If you guys have any questions or want to have anything or of the sort, I'm happy to always chat and discuss. But really, they fall upon each thing, and one is focused on purpose, the second is perseverance, and the third is about empathy. And so the first one I want to start off with is purpose. And so a lot of times you always hear about, okay, this person started this company, or I guess in some of the credentials, I remember when I got interviewed at CNN, they were asking, okay, at 16, how did you leave Alabama, decide to start a glove company, to change the military and also the youth? And really it comes down to, you gotta identify your purpose and what is it that really matters to you. For me, I really discovered that around 8th grade time from my math teacher. And that's actually one of the first opening in my life. So when I was in 8th grade, I was actually probably a DF student until that point. I actually almost got held back, actually. And a lot of that was because I just wasn't happy. My parents are great, they're good people, but back then, to be honest, they were too young to really have kids. And so they, in essence, they were a lot of times trying to take care of themselves. And I think a lot of times it's conflicted what really mattered, what I was trying to do, and getting a lot of these conflicting results, right? And I felt like I had no control. I didn't know what was actually going on in my life. And so for me, the first story really revolves around my 8th grade math teacher one day held me after class and said, like, hey David, do you know why I'm keeping you after class again today? And I'm used to this. She always keeps me after class because I get in trouble all the time. So I said, like, yeah, I probably did something wrong. She's like, no. She's like, well, I want you to solve this problem for me, this math problem. And I just looked at it and was like, no, there's no way I can solve this math problem. There's no way. And she says, well, I know you can because I saw you solve it for your friend. I was like, okay, so what? Big deal. And she said that, well, the way you solved it is nothing I ever taught before. So basically you, in essence, figure it out and figure out how that exactly worked. And she paused like at me as, I don't know what's going on in your life or what hardships or troubles you have, but really if you take charge, take control, you really can do things no one else can. I've never seen anyone solve it this way. And that really resonated with me because up to that point, I really did make a few F's actually until that point. And I realized that, okay, what is it that really matters to me? It really doesn't matter what someone else tells you or hear all the stories and stuff. You gotta find a way to connect with it, find what's your purpose, what do you really want to accomplish, and what really resonates and vibes with you, right? And from that actually made a huge difference. And for me, I was so grateful for that teacher, but really that resonated with me and really changed how I approach things, and I no longer saw school as just extra work. And I saw what it means to get out of Alabama and go do something different. I also saw that I could actually understand things, so instead of always relying on my parents, I can actually do something else and be different. And so that's really what I learned from that. Okay, is that kind of useful, or does that kind of make sense? Okay, good. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. We'll talk about perseverance. And so with perseverance, it's like people use it, and you hear all these stories. I guess when they did it, they talked about like, okay, with my first company, I think I was still 16 or 17 at the time, and we were being used by the entire U.S. military, and we had already reached like $10-20 million at that point, and still wasn't even 18 at the point. And so they were always like, wow, it's so easy, all these things happen, but you only hear the good, right? Everyone talks about like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, you don't hear how much they suffered, how hard it was actually getting there. And it really, honestly, it sucks sometimes. It's really tough. And what people don't get too also when they hear stories like, okay, well, they hired this business person that was able to trick IBM to sell their stuff to Bill Gates, and so he started Microsoft, right? Or like with Steve Jobs, it was about like being able to convince Xerox to get the mouse to actually start the personal computing and the MacBook. But what they don't hear is about how oftentimes you fail and how many times you fail until you make something success. And that's really, we all experience that, and that's something where you can't get discouraged. You have to always keep going after it and do it if you believe in your purpose, which is why I said the first story. If you really believe in something, then you will succeed, right? You're all smart, you all got in the Haas, which is damn hard to get into. And so I feel that you guys can definitely make it work. And that's really comes down to if you know what you want to do, then you will make sure it works. So for the story I have for experience, I had a long list of where I failed and struggled. So I thought I'd throw a couple to see which ones you relate most to. So I'll just run through the list and you guys just kind of raise your hands on the ones that sound interesting. And then I'll basically the one where people raise the most hands, then I'll talk about that story. First one is like how I almost failed out of my first CS class. And I struggled balancing school and life and start extracurricular activity. We can talk about that. Any interest in that one? Not really? Okay. The second one is how I spent like 2 weeks rehearsing, practicing for like a venture capitalist pitch to try to convince them to buy my first company, the military glove company. And the guy basically turned me down within 15 seconds. Like, what can happen then? Okay. Everyone's like, yes, I want to hear this one. Okay. This one's not a very good one. It's very embarrassing. But okay. Another one is, so everyone hears about Black Ties, how like we became valued at like $20 million in 6 months. We had $500,000 revenue, but they don't hear about the 3 or 4 different iterations. I don't know if some of you guys heard Blue Ties before, but that's actually that's what the company was beforehand. So I can talk a story about how much it sucks doing a startup and how it actually got to the point it is. Is that of interest? Okay, a little bit more interest. Okay, and then I guess let's stick with that one then. We'll talk about that one. And I can always visit the other thing. So what Black Ties is nowadays is a career matching platform that really helps people figure out what's the right major, what's the right internship, who do I talk to get the right jobs, and based on my skills and desires, what is the best recommended courses or internships or job for me, right? And really when we met with, I'm sure you guys heard of Excel or General Catalyst or all these things, they funded Snapchat, they funded Airbnb, and Pinterest. They're like, wow, this is so awesome that you guys are able to come up with 6 months. But reality, Black Ties and technology took 3.5 years to get to this point. And what happened was when we first started, we were purely a data analytics platform company that helped people figure out exactly what mattered to them in terms of their weights of how they assess people at work. So I know when you guys in class, I guess when you all start doing your internship, you'll start to notice that a lot of times people assess and evaluate how you do, how you perform. Right? Your manager has a set of metrics, and they assess your skills and give you kind of a weight in a score, right? So that's kind of how we started initially, and it failed miserably. Like our metrics didn't work. We actually said someone was really awesome, they were terrible, and vice versa, and we almost really didn't get a second chance, right? And so then what happened was we actually split ways, part with. It was actually a really hard discussion at the time. One of my good buddies, he ended up doing pretty well. I think he did this company called HomeJoy. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, like home cleaning service. And they raised over $100 million. And I remember he gave me advice. It's like, dude, you should quit the startup life and go back to just getting a normal 9-to-5 job, because it was like people were having all these things. And so realistically, what happened was we actually took 2 weeks off to figure out, rehash what was it that people liked. We actually went back to those customers and some of those people that really hated us because we didn't get to work and said, what actually worked? What didn't work? What did you like? And we had to actually face that, right, and go back to them again. And surprisingly, that's something you'll find in life is people sometimes will give you a chance because you show them that you're wrong, you care, and you actually want to make something work. And as a result of that, we got a second chance, second iteration. And when it became sort of we realized that people really weren't happy with their jobs and they need a way to level up internally and externally, so it became Blue Ties, right? And during that time with Blue Ties, we never had the right product market fit. We never had the right angle, and honestly, we burned a lot of bridges that way while working that. But eventually, what we did find was what really mattered to people. Really, how can we find what job, right? When I tell you, I want to be a data scientist, right? Or I want to be a operations lead, or I want to be a project manager at Airbnb, right? What does that actually mean? How do you get that job? And is that even the job you really want, right? And that's really came with really understanding and really talking to everyone every step we failed, redrawing back the board, coming back to the scratch board and redrawing together and really making it work. And I gotta tell you, sometimes it was rough. There was one time when someone actually slammed the door in my face and said like, hey, David, if you ever talk to me again, then like, I'm gonna do something physically violent against you, right? I don't know if these things are recorded, so I don't ever say the exact words I use, but in a nice way, that's what and reality, but in the end, he actually be one of our biggest customers, right? He would help us push over this $500,000 mark. And that's something that you ought to consider. You will probably fail multiple times at the same thing, but if you really believe in, you identify your purpose and push at it, you will do really well. And before you know it, you'll create something that's really good, whatever that is. So the last thing I want to talk about really comes down to empathy. And that word empathy, I think a lot of times, you have to sort of find a connection of passion in terms of what you do, and you really need to be thoughtful for yourself and also towards others, right? The thing that I've come to realize a lot of times is that a lot of times we want to build a product or do a coursework or we want to study hard, and we see how much we suffer or how much we work at it, but we don't realize everyone else that's involved, whether it's girlfriend, boyfriend, whether it's your parents, whether it's the people that believe in you or of that sort, right? They have to get something up too. And really understanding where the position comes will make you all a lot happier, right? And that comes with, and I give people a little bit of information about design, right? A lot of times when we make a product, when you heard all those stories about us, what do we think people want? What do we think students want to figure out their major? What is about them? But when we turn it around and talk to those students, talk to people looking for jobs, talk to people that are struggling, we actually identify what really matters to them. And constantly we have to revisit and understand from their perspective what's happened. So a lot of times what we end up doing was we would go become students at Berkeley or Stanford, and we got some laughed at a lot of times, and sneak into classrooms and actually sit down and pretend to see what it was like to them. Or we'll actually go to events, see what struggles they have, right? And so those things make it happen. And honestly, this will take you a long way, a lot more ways than you realize. So the first venture I did while I was at MIT was this U.S. glove company that's used by all U.S. infantrymen. And what happened was when we first built it, the glove company, the first 6 months or so was not so good. But what really made me change my perspective and build a product that worked, because we kept going back to the government, and they're like, technology-wise, you built this really smart glove that has sensors, that waterproof, that seems really advanced, and that can talk to one, but it just really, the soldiers can't use it. They just don't want to use it, right? And I think the first step for me to really change that was, I was flying back, from Alabama, and the airport, unfortunately there's no airport within 2-3 hours of where I live. So, yeah, it's still pretty backwards, sadly. But, so we basically had to drive to Atlanta, Georgia for me to catch an airplane to fly back to MIT. And what happened was, at the time, I guess 16, 17, still don't remember, and there is a large base called Fort Benning there. And Fort Benning is basically where they send all the U.S. military soldiers to go train and figure out exactly what it's like to go to Afghanistan and Iraq, right? I remember going there, and I remember you see all these soldiers getting there, and they're getting ready to board a plane to go to Afghanistan and Iraq. And that was really when I first started thinking about really other people. And it sucked, because I looked around me. These people were like, 17, 18, 19, all around my age. And whether you believe in the war or not, I still have mixed feelings about it. But think about it. You see all these moms, dads, brothers, and sisters. They're there with the person, the soldier. They're like crying because they're going to a foreign country, fighting for a cause they may or may not believe in, and not know exactly what's going on, so that we can have the right to go to school. In my time, I realized it's like, these people, I don't even know them, and they're, especially with their family. so that I myself can actually go to MIT, go to school, and not have to worry about those things. And it really resonated to me as like, wow, how much is that going on? And that honestly was the first time where I actually sat down and thought, hey, we're building this product, and our goal is to really leave no person behind, help you communicate with your team with this glove. Is this of interest? How can we make it work? I see your pain and your struggles, pro communicating it. And that quickly came to highlight what really mattered, right? So for them, a lot of times, it's like, it's great. So what our glove did was imagine us four were in a fire team, or infiltrating the space, right? I can't really say anything, because if I talk to you, the enemy can hear me, right? I can't necessarily see you, because if I can see you, the enemy can probably see you too, right? And at the same time, it's very loud with gunfire, so you can't even hear what I say. So we integrate a bunch of sensors and technologies in the glove, and based on hand gestures and signals, then, so I do something like this. So for each of you, you'll hear enemy approaching 200 yards at this rate, either through an eye display piece, so virtually, or through your display piece, right, audibly. So you never say anything, you never take your hand on a rifle, it's seamless communication. But then that's where we found out, they said like, yeah, our biggest reason is we don't want to ever be left alone, because it sucks when I'm starting to work on it and I don't know who my team is, right? Okay, so we gotta add GPS location tracking to triangulate that, make those matchups more precise. Well, they don't have time to do that, so we have to create a standard set of library commands so they can actually integrate that. So that's what I mean with all these stories, like first you gotta find your purpose. Second, you gotta work damn hard and it's constantly a lot of failure. But three is you gotta understand exactly, not just for yourself, but why it matters to someone else. If you connect those things together, honestly, you'll be able to make anything work, anything succeed. And that's what I've been able to see. And I think in the end what it comes down to is, you'll gain a lot and you grow a lot, but then you'll gain so many other things besides your career, besides understanding yourself, or being introspective, and actually building some really great friendships and great relations along the way. So those are my 3 stories. That's it. So. I want to leave some time for questions or any other stories you may want to hear, or any questions that, in general, I can help out with, right? I know that you all probably don't have any questions, because getting into Haas is definitely not easy, and you guys are actually staying after to listen to these speeches. But is there anything I can answer, or things that you guys have questions for me that I can maybe help out or guide with? It could be from schoolwork, choosing majors, jobs, getting an internship, or the next career, or even more introspective stuff, or that sort. Any questions? Yes. Go ahead.
How do you go about selling to the U.S. military?
Yeah, so that itself is a pretty good question. So you have to sort of show exactly what matters. So back then, when I started the company, there was 3 other Asian dudes that were all non-US citizens. And I have to tell you, it was not a good experience. They're like, you speak our language? I was like, I should mean English? They're like, yes. That was kind of conversation, right? And for us, really, you gotta find a champion or someone that can connect with them. And I think that's true even with our current company. Really, when we went to talk to Google, right? They're like, they make jokes like, can you drink legally? That kind of stuff, which basically means that they don't see eye to eye with you and they don't think you buy something. So what we did instead was we thought about what are we good at and where do we need help. So for the military's case, we're like, okay, we can build really good technology. We can correlate with some of the soldiers, but we don't have the clout or the senior leadership or even the upper level understanding of how the infrastructure worked to make us sell. So what we did was we went and found some soldiers that champion group thinking, group processes, and found some Green Berets and special forces people say hey, this is really cool. We got a couple of them to really buy into it. Then we found this one guy, James, who was incredibly, and by the way, I remember he would always look at us bro, does this thing really work? I was like, yes. He's like, if you lag, I can kill you. I was like, I know. So it was you get his chemistry, and he's like, okay. Basically, he bought into, he had a lot of respect. He's like, I know a 4-star general that would potentially be interested. Let's have a connection, let me show it at. And you basically, this chat, you go up to it, represent it to him, and I remember, and you gotta think about this, and that's what I mean by you have to succeed multiple times. We thought that was it. We thought oh man, we got this 4-star general, he liked it and that. That wasn't it, actually. The next thing was they flew us down to Fort Belvoir in Washington D.C., a special base, and present to a ton of generals all these things. And we got asked the same questions like, are you even 18 yet? And like, can you speak English? You know, like same thing. And like, but we practiced. We had to have better answers the first time. But what you come up to is then you figure out like, okay, what do I need to do? And so then you get the next set of champions. Eventually you have these big group of people that'll back you up and make it work. And that's what I mean about empathy and being able to help find other people to work with. Because honestly, no one can do it alone because we have different skills. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Yes?
So, how did you come up with this idea to sell gloves for the military?
You guys ask good questions, I gotta say embarrassing stuff. So, okay, we were doing a problem set. You guys saw problem sets too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're doing this problem set, we didn't want to do it. So we're like goofing off, we're flipping through this magazine. I think it was a Maxine magazine. But anyways, and there was this ad for like this video game for a soldier. And we saw the soldier that was stuck in this pond. I don't remember what the game was called, but we see this airplane flying by, and he gets like stuck in this pond, and there's fire everywhere. He looks really scared. We're like, dude, that guy needs some help. Oh, he looks like he's radioing someone for help, but how can he radio someone when he's like his hands are tied, right? Oh wait, you know what? We should be able to design. Someone should build a glove, put earpiece and app. And we're like, hey, wait, we can do this. So we probably all failed that problem set because we didn't turn it in, but we built a glove out of it. So that's kind of fun. Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. Our teacher was not happy when he told that because later on, so when we made the company happen and work, they actually invited us to come back to speak at MIT for it, and our major. And I remember our professor like, oh, so that's why you guys all failed it. And we're like, yeah. He's like, that's not an excuse. We're like, yeah. So it's okay. All right, yes.
So for all of your ventures, like how did you find or like choose your co-founders, and did you have struggles with the co-founders that you chose?
I agree with both. Those are really two good questions to ask, and I'm happy to chat more about that some other time as well, but I'll go into some of that. So I think this is where it comes to really get good at something, right? You have something that people will admire you about. And that's what then, like, think about it. When you want to work with someone in a group project, right? Whether it's because they're really smart at something, or they're just really fun to hang out with, or something, there's something about them that draws you to them, right? And I think in every case, it works both ways. For me, I try to get really good at a couple of skills that makes me stand out. And then I look for some people with skills that I don't have and correlate with them. And so that's the skill matchup. But the thing that you also need is people talk amongst each other, right? I'm sure that you all know a little bit about a lot of things going on. And so you have this develop stuff they call street cred, right? And so then it's like, you meet other people, they may know something about you or that sort. So you constantly do good things and you have a good vision, it's aligned, they're more willing to work with you. In fact, this latest venture that we've been working on, a lot of the people that initially kicked it off the board were people that I worked with from my first company, actually, and then some people I worked with at S&P. And so developing that relation is very key. And in terms of your second question about how conflict will always arise because people that you work with hopefully are either A, passionate, right? Or B, they really want to make it. They really want to make it better, or B, they really question what you're doing to make it even better, right? So they always question it, or they want to like improve it. And so that's good. The question is, what kind of conflict, what kind of motivation, right? As long as it's positive, there's always a way to channel them and make it work and go forward. And you're going to cause that. The moment that it starts being bad is if you guys can't communicate and the goal becomes too wide, or the difference starts different. And that happens too, right? So in those cases, you always have to chat and get it done early on before it gets too late.
So even before that, how do you find them? Or like, if you don't know anyone that would be a good fit, how would you find a co-founder?
Okay, so for my first instance, the first one was from class, right? We just didn't want to do a problem set. So that's how I found the first one. The one I'm currently doing right now, a lot of times, it actually came from referrals from my first one. So I talked to some of my original founders, and they referenced it. I also post on the MIT. So MIT has a group, I don't know if Berkeley has a group, where they have people that have successfully done companies of 10 million plus. And basically, I posted on that, and so then people, Auto has some street cred and get you into that. So if there's groups that you guys have, or certain communities that happen like that, you can do that. There's also general posting, right? You can go to Facebook, Reddit groups, all that things to post. That takes a little bit more time. You find to vet those people a little bit more before you find what's the right mesh with you, right? And then finally, let's say you're interested in VR. Let's say you're interested in like, just go to groups and communities that have that and talk to people and see if you resonate with those people, right? Because they will probably want to work on things you want to work on, because that's why they're there, and that connects, well, that's great. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions? So, okay, yes?
Can you tell a story about the getting shot down for 2 seconds?
Oh yeah, that was pretty bad. So we had this, we're super excited because we thought we were hot shots at this point, and so we were like, okay, we're gonna kick ass and do this thing. And we do over prepare, so we literally spent 2 weeks like studying this guy, doing all this analysis, what matters, what they care about, and what they can ask. And we had this PowerPoint, we even created a video with a person in it, and all these things. And we went in there, and the first thing we saw them, when I saw an investor, one of my other co-founders at the time, he's like, oh, so you guys are working in the military? And the guy's like, yeah, I'm waiting to build it. Can you sign an NDA? And in the VC world, you never ask them to sign an NDA, right? And that basically didn't do research. And NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. Basically, it combines and tells the investor and saying, you cannot share any of our idea. Well, as an investor, they're going to hear tons of ideas. So there's no way they're going to sign an NDA, right? So basically, he's like, you did not do your homework. I don't want to talk to you in a discussion, right? And we learned a lot from that. We did try to show them the video, but it didn't really work. So yeah, we got shot. So that's a good learning, a lesson that make sure you can make mistakes. You just don't want to make the big mistakes. And that was a big mistake. That's how you want to balance it out. So, okay, great. Any other questions? Anything about school or anything of that sort? I'm happy to answer those things. Or even, yes.
How are you supposed to approach an investor without giving away the idea?
That's a very difficult thing to do. And to be frank about, there's a mixture of these. Like, investors always tell you your ideas are safe with them. That's not true, to be frank. I've had many friends where they've been exploited, to be frank about that. But that being said, there's some with good street cred. And usually what you do, it's a similar thing. It's like, you kind of give them a little bit, but not the big substance, right? It's imagine if like you want to sell someone like a car or something like that, right? Or if you want them to see this movie, right? Give them like a teaser. You see all these movies and things. You see a teaser, what could happen, and you get excited, right? But you saw the entire thing, or even half it, or the key parts, you're not going to go to the movie. So what you do with investors is you don't give them like everything. You just give them like the key parts that will not hurt you, that will attract them to follow on. And then you say like, hey, if you want to have a sub-secret meeting, let's chat. And by the way, if you have a question, feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to chat about that because I've been both in the reverse. And believe it or not, there's a couple big name companies. One of them I actually just mentioned as a hint, but they actually had their first company idea stolen, and they actually ended up pivoting. So it don't have to be a good thing for them, but that stuff happens all the time. Yes.
How did you choose mechanical engineering?
Yeah. So actually, mechanical engineering was one of the ones I thought about. I ended up doubling in material science engineering and also computer science. But I did try mechanical engineering, but I didn't do very well on the first exam, so I scrapped that one. And so for me, it came down to 2 different philosophies. So I wrote a list of things that matter to me and what I want to accomplish now and in the future. For me, one of the struggles I always had was how can I improve my analytical thinking, especially with sort of physical objects, right? So for me, like I can write code, and I can actually be able to understand some theories in that. But for me, it's always like, wow, for example, how they select the right materials or composites to build something so lightweight and durable to be the stand that people can easily transport and move around, right? So for me, I needed that because I remember when I was working on my first company, I had trouble with Gap building the glove, right? I was like, okay, I get the glove, I get the sensors, but why do we select this type of material? What's the after effect with military? What's all the resistance? And so it allowed me to balance that out. So really, for me, to answer that, the biggest thing that mattered to me was what I wanted to accomplish in life and what led me to that. Because the truth is, since then, I haven't used my material science major again. And I think for me, I look back, what I gained was the right type of thinking as a video game. And also the type of connections I developed too. Because honestly, through there, I got to get very close with some of my professors. I got to meet some brilliant students that also. So. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes?
I'm just going to go into questions. First one, why did you change the name from Blue Ties to White Ties?
Yeah.
And then the second question is like, now that you're in the Bay Area, would you say that the Bay Area is the best place to be to start your own venture, or would like New York be okay too, or like another place?
Okay, to answer going to so the first question is, I don't have, it's a very dumb reason. So we like the name Black Ties, but given that for my previous ventures we've always changed the name because we've always messed up, so we always had to change the name. So we're like, okay, well let's just pick some other random color. So really it was pink ties or blue ties or one of those colors, and we just chose blue ties, right? And by the way, I think someone else is actually one of the interns that was just graduated actually from Berkeley who picked blue ties, and she argued why we should be blue instead of pink. Sorry, man. I wish I could give you something better, but that's true. Okay. And your second is the Bay Area the best? It depends. It depends on what size you're trying to raise. It depends on what kind of area you're in. And it depends on who you're going to work with. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're in biotech or life sciences, probably Boston is generally probably better than the Bay Area, right? Also size. Generally, this is like more bigger. You want to grow something really big, this is really the place to be, right, to do it. But if you want something that you want to grow and have substantial and go from there, Austin, Texas, Boston, Raleigh, Durham are actually other options that work pretty well, right? But I think the most important part is who do you have to make this work? Right, a lot of times, and I'll tell you, like one of the big things where people were willing to give us so much money before we even had the product that worked. By the way, our first thing we sold to our customer, we didn't actually have a product that worked. And that was definitely very scary. There was times when they're like, hey, so, can I poke around and look at this? We're like, sure. They're like, oh, well, how come this is a 404 loading error? I was like, don't worry about it. You know, that kind of stuff, right? And that's why I mean that you got to find the people. And that's because I have great people I work with. They were able to cover those gaps and make something work and iterate very quickly, right? And there was times where like we literally failed pretty badly. The customer was like, that's not what we want. We're like, hey, no problem. We'll show you something tomorrow. And a lot of times, will that do? And they'll be like, yeah, sure, because they didn't believe us, right? But we were able to get that work. So if you find the right people that are also passionate, that's where I actually would focus on where your venture is. Because ultimately, they will work on whatever's most eventful for you. But I'm happy to talk more. You can just send me an email about those things. So, yes?
So you study computer science, which is also what I'm studying.
Yes.
Would you consider yourself more of a business person or an engineer?
Yes. Probably not good at either, to be honest. But for me, I tend to say I'm more quantitative stuff. Like, so, okay, it's part of why we have our product. What I like doing is I like a lot of the analytics, a lot of data writing code. I actually really like doing that. What I'm good at is not that. Like, what I'm good at is better at actually relating and figure out how to make strategic partnerships, how to be creative and change the product in the right direction, how to make that presentation in a way that they'll buy into it, and how to quantify and break down the right features that the users want to use, right? And so for me, based on those two balances, I found my perfect niche in terms of what I was good at and became an expert in that area, right? So for a lot of people, what I'm really good at is David's ability to prioritize and figure out very quickly what the users are and make some hack something very elementary that will work, that people buy it very quickly, right? And so that may be different for a lot of different people. For me,